Good afternoon and welcome to this Chemistry World webinar. Today we're going to be looking at teaching design of experiments to chemists, and we're particularly looking at lessons from Imperial College London. I'll tell you more about the topic and our guests for today's webinar in just a minute, but first of all, let me introduce the software that we're using, which is GoToWebinar. Now, the idea of this is that you can use it to interact with our speakers as much as possible. So the key thing you need to know is there's a questions box in there that you can use to ask any questions at any point throughout the webinar. So do just drop them in there. We will handle them all. We'll put as many as possible to our speakers at the end of the webinar. If we don't get time, then what we'll do is we'll email them all over to our speakers as well. Should they have a useful answer for you, or if they can get back to you, then they will be happy to do so. So do please get any questions you want into that GoToWebinar box. GoToWebinar is also really quite adaptable, so you can move things around your screen. If you'd like to see less of my face and more of the presentation, for example, then you can turn off the webcams, you can move the webcams, you can resize them. So do just make GoToWebinar whatever you want it to be and sit back, get comfortable and enjoy the following hour's presentation and our guests. So our guest today will be Ben Deadman, who's the Facility Manager for RAW at Imperial College London. I'll tell you more about what that is in just a sec. And Volker Kraft from JMP's academic programme. Throughout the course of the webinar, we're going to learn why chemists should learn about DoE. That's design of experiments, and I will be calling it DoE from here on in. We're going to learn how to get started with teaching DoE. You can now see Ben as well. What barriers may be encountered, the best practices for teaching DoE in chemistry, and opportunities to collaborate with RAW at Imperial College. Now, RAW is the rapid online analysis of reactions at Imperial College. Ben, who you can see on screen, is the facility manager of the Centre for RAW. He uses his 10 years of experience in reaction automation and reaction analysis to support the facility of users throughout their adventures in data-rich chemical synthesis experimentation. Later on, we'll be joined by Volker Kraft, who is a senior academic ambassador in the JUMP research team. And again, you can see him on screen now. He fosters and supports the use of JMP in teaching and research, holds a PhD in electrical engineering, and is enthusiastic in enabling teachers, faculty, and students throughout Europe who are interested in using JUMP to get the most from their software. Now, first of all, we're going to have a presentation from Ben, but before we go into that, we just want to get an idea of who you are, the people who are currently attending. So let's share our first poll, and we'd like you to answer this question, please. What is your main interest in today's session? And you can tick more than one box if you like. Are you here just to learn about design of experiments in chemistry, to learn more about teaching design of experiments at a university level in particular? Do you want to know more about the experience at Imperial College London and what Ben and his colleagues have been working on? Do you want to learn more about general data collection and analytic tools like JUMP, or is there some other reason that caused you to be particularly interested in today's session? So we're just going to give you a short opportunity to vote. Just about half of you have voted so far. I can see some questions coming in already, so that's fantastic. Do please keep your questions coming in. Every question we get helps us to tailor these webinars to make sure that they're exactly what you want and you can get the most possible benefit from them. So over half of you have voted. Let's close the poll and let's share the poll now. Let's see what most people are interested in. So you're here to learn more about design of experiments in chemistry predominantly, but a good over half of you are here to learn more about data collection and analytic tools, and a significant proportion are here to learn about teaching DoE at a university level. That's good. And also at the Imperial College London experience itself. So it sounds like today's topic is exactly right for everybody who has signed up. Thank you ever so much. Now, there will be a mixture of presentation and software demo for you today. So we won't be making the slides available afterwards. What we will do instead is we will make the entire presentation as a recording available. Now that's good because it means you get the context of the words that are being said and not just the text on the slides. That recording will be sent out to everybody who registered in a few days' time. So keep an eye out in your inbox for a link to that recording. And then you can watch this again, catch up on any bits you've missed, review bits you just wanted to go through again. That will be available to you shortly. And at the same time, and this will be in a few days' time, we will also send a certificate of attendance to everybody who has come and joined us here today live. So that will be in your inbox in a few days' time. Give us a few days to get everything processed, and then you'll receive that soon. In fact, I can see we've already had a question about getting a certificate, so hopefully that answers your question straight out of the gate. So that's quite enough from me. Do get your questions in to the GoToWebinar platform. Failing that, I'm going to hand over to Ben Deadman and he can take it away. Ben, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ben. Let's do, there we go. Okay, I believe you can see my screen. So what I'm going to cover today, well, I'm going to start by giving you a bit of introduction to the raw facility and what we're doing. I'm going to tell you a bit about why I believe chemists should learn about DoE. I will then hand over to Volker, who's going to tell you a bit about the journey Jump have gone on with Imperial College and how they've helped us develop this bespoke course to teach students about design of experiments. He will also provide a short demo of the course we've been doing, and then it will come back to me, and I will, give you a kind of very blunt, kind of, very honest appraisal of some of the lessons we've learned along the way, and then we'll wrap up with where you can go for further information. So, what is RAW? Well, before I can tell you about RAW, I need to take a step back and talk about Dial and Molecule. So this is a network. It was formed about 10 years ago in the UK, and it's made up of synthetic chemists and chemical engineers from across academia and industry. And it's really thinking about the changes we need to make to synthetic chemistry over the next 10 to 20 years to make it a truly predictable science. The tagline is, how can we make molecules in days, not years? And key to this is making synthetic chemistry a data-driven discipline. And so design of experiments has a really key role in this. But over the years, the network has found that there was a need for a physical center where we can have advanced instrumentation and supporting expertise. And so this is where RAW comes in. We've been around for a couple of years now, and we're based in Imperial College. But so RAW is part of the Style and Molecule network. We opened last year. We opened for business after much setting up, and the idea is to keep in one place all of the equipment, the expertise, the software, and the training to do data-rich experiments in synthetic chemistry. And so this is your one-stop shop to go and run an experiment and get your help along the way and learn how to use really advanced instrumentation. It's key to say, RAW is not just for Imperial College. This is the Center for Rapid Online Analysis of Reactions. We are a facility for the chemistry community. We are here for anyone from academic chemistry in the UK to come and work with us, industry as well. And I guess I should dial in as well. And a key thing we do is try and train our users up to use this advanced instrumentation. And so the types of experiments we do, I break it down into 4 key areas. 1, high throughput experimentation. So not just doing one experiment or several experiments, we're talking about using robotic platforms to do hundreds of experiments, really testing that reaction space. If we're going back to doing a few experiments, we're going to do them really well and really controlled. So we use automated reactor technologies. These are automated reactors that are controlled by a computer. So really clearly defined procedures and lots of data flows coming out of the reactor about what's happening. The third area, in situ analysis. So we have a lot of analytical tools, things like infrared spectroscopy to visualize what's happening in the reaction over time. We can get detailed time profiles of our experiments. What I'm here to talk to you today about is our 4th area, design of experiments, advanced analysis. And so, we're providing a lot of training in design of experiments. And training, that is a key thing I'll keep coming back to with this presentation. So we were very fortunate over the last couple of years to get funding for a EPSRC Centre for Doctoral Training in Next Generation Synthesis and Reaction Technology. We had our first batch of students come in October last year, and these students are learning about chemistry, reaction engineering, and data science. And a core part of their curriculum is learning about design of experiments. And so why are we so keen on teaching these students about design of experiments? Well, at the moment, it's not covered in undergraduate chemistry training. You know, the students that are coming into our courses, they don't know about DoE yet at the graduate level. But DoE is an essential skill. When we were setting up our CDT, we did a lot of consultation with the chemical industries in the UK. And you know, it was almost unanimous. We were told that chemical industries in the UK, be it research or process, they want their chemists to have design of experiments skills. And so that's why there's a growing trend to provide DoE training at the postgraduate level in the UK. And there's a number of hotspots around the country which are all, you know, moving in this area. One I will highlight is the Dialer Molecule Network has set up a summer school at Loughborough University. So every year they run this summer school. It's a week-long residential course. Students come in and learn about DoE, learn about advanced tools, and then actually do some experiments and see how DoE applies in that. So why am I so passionate about DoE? Well, before I can tell you about that, I have to step back and kind of explain what the situation is in synthetic chemistry at the moment. How do synthetic chemists do their optimization? This is a recent paper from the Journal of the American Chemical Society. It's actually a very nice paper in a very high-profile journal, but it highlights quite well how the vast majority of chemists do their experimentation. It's what we call the one factor at a time approach. So they have this reaction system here, and they're choosing to optimize a number of variables. The two I'm focusing on here are the equivalence of the sodium terbutoxide base and the reaction temperature. And so this particular group, what they've done to optimize their equivalence of base is they've fixed all the other variables and then changed the amount of base they put in and done a series of experiments. And you can see here on the chart, as the number of bases change, they measure the change in yield. And then they find the maximum yield, fix the equivalence of base, and then go and move on and test the next variable, in this case temperature, and try different temperatures. This is one factor at a time. It's a very stepwise iterative process, and it's taken them 15 experiments to do a detailed coverage of these two variables. What's not considered is something we call a two-factor interaction. Now, it's not necessarily one at play here, but we need to be aware for them and look out for them. So a two-factor interaction is where the result of an experiment, two factors aren't truly independent. The classic example I like to use in our courses is reaction temperature and reaction time. Synthetic chemists intrinsically understand that due to reaction theory, the yield at a point in time is also dependent on the temperature. So you can't optimize the reaction temperature and then go and optimize the time and get a fixed point and then subsequently go and change the temperature and expect the yield to be the same or to be optimized at the same point in time. These variables are linked. You've got to optimize them together. So how does that work in a one factor at a time approach? Well, I think of OFAT, as I'm going to call it from now on, as very much this traversing of reaction space. If we're looking at temperature, we're going to try different temperatures and see how the yield goes, find the maximum, and then we'll go and look at the other variable, time, and go and test time. And if we visualize that on this alternative plot here, this temperature versus time plot, with the circular dots are colored by reaction yield, the orange is the higher yield, and you can see what they've done is we've traversed the space in this axis and then gone and traversed in the other one, and we've found a hot spot here, and then we're going to assume that that is the optimum. We've done, of course, no testing of this space here and no testing of this space here. And then we're assuming that this is the optimum here, and actually we've ignored, the possibility that there is maybe a better point in there here. How would this have been different if we'd done a design of experiments? Well, in the DoE approach, it's much more a mapping exercise. Design of experiments, we're going to pick the outer extremes of the reaction space and the center point. And then what we're going to do based on those results, we then fit a multi-dimensional surface to that, and we can start to make some predictions about how this is what the surface would look like. We make some predictions about how the yield would be in these white spaces here, even though we've not done the testing, because we've done this kind of surface fitting, we can have a best guess, a pretty good estimate of how it would be in these spaces here. So DoE is very much a mapping approach. Another reason I like design of experiments is how it applies to the experimentation cycle. So if we think about a classical experimentation cycle, we will have a hypothesis. We think that reaction temperature is a key variable we want to test, and we think that maybe higher temperatures might be better for the reaction. So we'll go and design an experiment to test different reaction temperatures. We'll run the experiment, we'll do some measurements, analyze the data, and then based on that, we should hopefully know what the best temperature is for the reaction. That's a very OFAT approach. And then we might go, right, the next hypothesis is that the equivalence of base would be an important test to do. So we'll go and look at that. So OFAT is very much an iterative, do an experimental cycle on one variable, then do the next variable, then the next, then the next, then the next. And what you want to avoid is having to go back through here because you've got these kind of two-factor interactions and you're having to cycle around multiple times. In the design of experiments approach, what we're doing instead is we're trying to hypothesize what are all the important variables that are at play in our system at the start. So we think about these, we some of them we might decide, you know what, we don't think that's going to be important based on prior knowledge and we'll fix it. But all the ones we think are going to be important, we're going to design an experiment to test those at the same time. DoE is a multivariate approach. We'll then run that experimental cycle, testing a whole set of variables at once. We'll get some knowledge about the system, and then we'll be able to go through and say, you know what, when we looked at these variables here, it turned out that concentration and stoichiometry actually weren't that important. So we can do a second cycle around the experimentation cycle, looking to get more detailed information about the factors, the variables which are most important. In this case, catalyst loading, temperature, and time. But you see, we've also started to look about, okay, you know what, we've seen that temperature and time are linked, so we're going to do a pretty detailed study about how those two variables interact. So, I guess that's given you a bit of a kind of a whirlwind tour about why I think DoE is so important for synthetic chemistry. It's a multivariate approach as opposed to univariate. We're just starting to do multi-dimensional analysis. You can start to do much more complex analysis. I guess we do need a computer to do DoE. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a disadvantage. Everyone's got a computer nowadays, and the software is very user-friendly. Again, a bit of a neutral point is DoE typically works on 2 to 3 levels. So there's a bit of a mindset change, whereas synthetic chemists might test 5, 6, a dozen different levels for certain variables. In DoE, we're starting to think about only testing 2 or 3 levels and trying to predict what's happening in between. There's a lot of built-in testing of variable interactions, and then there's also all this statistical analysis and predictive modeling that comes from the DoE approach. So that's why, several years ago when we got started in this journey with RAW and the React CDT, we were so keen to build DoE into our training courses. But we didn't have a lot of experience initially, so we went over to Jump and we said, right, hey guys, you seem to be really good at this. Can you help us develop a bespoke training course? And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Volker, who's going to tell you a bit about our adventures in developing this course.
Thank you very much, Ben. Just a little reminder to everyone attending, do keep those questions coming in. Some really good questions already. For the next, there we go. We've handed over to Volker now, so Volker's going to pick up. And just a little reminder, Volker, Senior Academic Ambassador in the JUMP academic team. So he's exactly the right person to talk to us about this. So thank you once again, Volker, for joining us. And we'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Ben. And Ben, let me also look back when our collaboration started, this time from JUMP's perspective. So in March 2017, when Professor Mimi He reached out to us, JUMP Pro was already a leading package in DOE and used by many of our customers in the chemical and other industries to better understand and optimize their processes. The JUMP academic program was in place for more than 10 years and providing universities not only access to Jump Pro, but also free teaching resources. Guided by ROAR, we developed a one-day workshop about design and analysis of experiments, which was extended into a two-day workshop this year. One goal of Ben and his team was to become independent in teaching DoE to their students, which has been supported by our continuous train-the-trainer support. Another goal was to get the most out of Jump, which is today integrated with their facilities for high-throughput experimentation. 1 year later, we were also approached by Imperial's Center for Doctoral Training in Chemistry. As Ben mentioned, their industry survey showed DoE as the by far most demanded skill. We could leverage most of the ROAR workshop content and teaching support also with the CDT, and a campus-wide Jump license was implemented to cover all students at Imperial College. Today, we have this DoE teaching program readily available for a straightforward implementation at a few other universities and CDTs as well. Our package has all components you need, but is also future-proof. Using the same software, you could also teach exploratory data analysis, multivariate analysis, machine learning, quality and process methods, leading to a lower overhead in teaching and deployment. Jump is also open to integrate with other software like Python, R, or MATLAB. And the blog post at this QR code shows you how easy it is to take your Jump course online. We always supported distance learning, which became the new normal during these times. The two-day course agenda covers topics like DoE versus one factor at a time, and optimal versus classical designs, basic statistical concepts, screening, response surveys, and robust designs, design diagnostics, the problem-solving workflow, and many best practices. Let's have a sneak peek into the DoE workshop. By the way, these are chemists at NTNU during the helicopter experiment. The Jump journal on the left structures the course and also stages all content. Day one uses a helicopter experiment, both as an icebreaker and also to make students thinking about experimentation. And also concept slides and live demos. New to this two-day course are two chapters looking into simple experiments with a single categorical factor and a single continuous factor in order to recap concepts like analysis of variance and regression. Day one continues with modern DoE. Students follow hands-on instructions to build a definitive screening design step by step. But they also get a 13-run design in a Jump table. The DoE dialog automatically stored a Jump script, which takes them back to the design of this experiment. So using the hands-on document, students start from scratch, of course, building this definitive screening design using the design tool from the menu. But also clicking on DoE dialog, they can go back to the design stage. And here you see that they started with a single response yield, and the goal was set to maximize this response, and the response should always be higher than 75%. We have 5 continuous factors in this experiment, and in this example there were no extra runs. So extra runs would give the students or the users some other benefits. So here we only have a 13-run design with 4 extra runs. Students would see a higher power to detect effects which are really active. Students can also look into other diagnostics like the prediction variance surface and also the color map on correlations between all the effects we are interested in. Making the table creates this table. In this case, we also have the yield, the response stored here, and the table still remembers what the goal is. We want to be higher than 75%. So the data for yield are already added to this column. That means the data are ready for analysis, and analysis is just another single click because the design tool already stored this script automatically. So users just click here. So the data are fit to this model, and this is an optimal approach for definitive screening experiments. So the main effects are fitted first, and assuming a strong heredity, we also find these second-order effects, including an interaction and also a quadratic term. I run this model, and we see that the most significant effect is time, but from this single 13-run experiment, we also see that there's a 2-factor interaction active between modifier and temperature, and that there is also a quadratic effect for time. I close some other diagnostic outputs here to go straight to this profiler, which shows what's going on. So here we see the predicted average yield, which is 76% now, and this is predicted for these settings, for these important factors, for our 3 factors. So we see that we have 2 linear relationships between yield and the 2 left factors, and a quadratic relationship, some curvature, between yield and time. We also see what we want. So this is still a reminder that we want to be higher than 75%. So that's our desirability. And we can change 1 factor. And changing 1 factor at a time, we see how this affects the response. So if the modifier goes up, also the yield goes up. But we also see, changing 1 factor, how the relationship between yield and another factor changes. And this is between modifier and temperature, which is our 2-factor interaction, which can be also seen on the profiler. The next step is to find the best settings, how to get the maximum yield and what would it be. So this can be done automatically by looking for the maximum desirability, the best scenario. And this sets modifier to the highest value, temperature to the lowest value, and time to this value here. And we see that the best yield we could expect here on average is at 82%. But what about real-world conditions and some random variation of these vector settings? For this, a simulator is also used, and by adding some random variation to our vector settings, students can simulate 5,000 yield values at the optimal settings, but with some random variation of our factors. And this shows us that we can expect a defect rate around 4%. And the defects are on the tail of this histogram for yield. So everything which is below our lower limit, which is still 75%. And then still on the first day, so students can simulate here and check the defect rate at the optimized settings. But students also use a simulation experiment to get to a more robust operational setting. And this helps to optimize, not looking for the highest yield, but finding the setting which provides the lowest defect rate. And this gets the students to a different operational condition. And this shows very nicely different approaches, different goals, and this ends with a very robust and a design and settings which really optimize the defect rate. So based on what we saw before, the defect rate was again halved. On the second day, so it starts with sequential experimentation, looking at the custom designer and augment design. And students also learn about the choice of advanced topics like blocking, split plot designs, or covariate factors, which can be changed, or which can not be controlled, but which do have an effect on the response. And during the afternoon, there's also this project here, the hack reaction, which is more a freestyle problem-solving task for the students, and Ben will talk more about this later. We typically close the second day with looking at some resources for further reading and learning. Okay, here you can grab some student feedback talking about an incredibly valuable workshop. We love to hear that it changed the way thinking about experiments and optimization, and when students appreciate the practical implementation. The surveys run by Imperial College after each class helped us to improve the course over the years. Majorities from the most recent class said they found the workshop helpful and that they likely recommend JUMP Pro to their colleagues. My final slide summarizes our offering, the JUMP Academic Suite for doctoral training in sciences and engineering. This package is straightforward to implement into other teaching programs, and it is available today. It covers every aspect to teach modern DoE in CDTs and master courses, and not only in chemistry. So you get free teaching support and material to get you up to speed, a site license for Jump Pro at very low annual fees and with no hidden extra costs, and finally, access to our academic industry network. Remember, this is all ready to go. Select the option on your exit survey to receive more information or email me directly. Back to Ben.
Thank you very much, Volker. Now, Volker is going to stay with us for the end of the presentation. So if you do have any questions for Volker about that course, about what you can learn, then do please get them into the software now. But for now, we'll hand back to Ben and he can carry on with his presentation.
Okay, thank you both. So I'm going to tell you about some of the lessons we've learned over the years with design of experiments at Imperial College. Well, some of the barriers we've encountered and what we've done to solve some of these barriers, break them down. A big one for us is getting the buy-in of research supervisors. You know, students come along to our course, they learn about this wonderful tool, and then they go back, and if their supervisor's not on board, they're not really going to be able to use it. And I guess key to that is the professors in synthetic chemistry. They're all used to doing this OFAT, this one fractal at a time approach. And we're also very aware that if we send students with some DoE knowledge and they have a bad experience, that could potentially put a whole research group off trying DoE again forever. So what we're trying to do to solve this barrier, well, we try and get the supervisors along to the course as much as possible. That's why we've structured our most recent version of the course as a 2-day one. So there's, that first day, if you just come along for half of that first day, you get a good flavor for how DoE works and a bit of an understanding about what's happening. We also make sure we present relevant case studies, case studies which are appropriate for the subject. And then the really key thing we do is we tell the students honestly about what the limitations of DoE are. It's not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve every optimization problem. And we try and give the students as many examples where DoE can be an advantage, but also tell them where, look, it's not going to solve that problem for you. Other problems, we find the students coming into our courses, they don't have a lot of statistical vocabulary. Now, this is not actually a huge problem. DoE and JUMP in particular, it doesn't require a lot of prior knowledge. You don't need to know a huge amount. So as we're going through the workshop, we provide many lay explanations for the few key statistical terms that they need to know. So we make sure we provide that detailed lay explanation. And then we highlight resources where they can go and find more information as they get comfortable. And we just repeat. Each time we do a new exercise, we make sure we talk about what the results are telling us. Another barrier, of course, is as we're showing them all these examples and these exercises, you get the inevitable questions about, my research means I'm doing this. How can I use DoE to solve this problem? And so what we're doing there is we're trying to, I guess, provide as much context, real world context to our exercises as possible. And because they're subject relevant, students can start seeing how that exercise would relate to some of their problems, or maybe problems that their co-workers have had. But the key thing we really do is we have power users in the sessions. There's the team delivering the course content, but also other users, and it's a very interactive experience with small group activities. And so we're always moving around, having these small group discussions with the students in the workshops, and so they can ask us, look, my chemistry means I'm testing this. What does, how would I use DoE for that? We can give them some advice about, how they would apply it to their research there and then on the spot. Of course, next I'm going to tell you about, I make a big deal about this fact about understanding where and when DoE can be an advantage in synthetic chemistry. So I've been building up this knowledge over the years, and I like to break down the academic reaction development cycle into 3 stages. In industry, it'd be a bit different, but in academia, we're talking about early stage studies where we know very little about the system, and we've got, many categorical variables, things like different catalysts, different solvents, different ligands. We want to test all these different things to try and find an initial hit which we can optimize further. In that kind of situation, I'm sorry, DoE's not going to be the magic bullet. It's not going to necessarily solve the problem for you. When you've got lots and lots of categorical variables with lots and lots of levels for those variables, you're either looking at full factorial experiments, high throughput experimentation, and Raw can do that. Come and talk to me separately about that if that's what's of interest to you. We can do it, but yeah, you need the tools available to really get the hundreds of experiments for that. If you're going to do it in your standard academic lab, you're probably going to be more guided by your chemical intuition, and you're going to require a little bit of luck. You're kind of, using your prior knowledge about the system and thinking, right, we think the catalyst is going to be essential, so we're going to test these 2 or 3 catalysts which we know have had, similar result or good results in similar systems, and kind of take a journey like that. But once you've got that initial hit, and you're then starting to think about optimizing it, that's where DoE can really start to be beneficial. And so I'm starting to break that down into what we call screening and optimization. In screening, we have some knowledge about the system, and we've started to whittle down the number of variables we're looking at, particularly the categorical variables. If we've only got a few categorical variables and a few levels of those variables, so there's a few key catalysts we're looking at, then DoE can have some real advantages. And the really cool thing is you can almost have as many continuous variables as you want, and it doesn't add large numbers of experiments for you. And so in this kind of stage here, we're looking to do screening experiments to test what are the most significant variables we should be focusing our effort on. Are there any 2-factor interactions we should investigate? Of course, the final stage is then the full-on optimization. At this stage, we know which variables are the most important. We've defined our reaction space, our parameter space. We know the lower and upper limits for the variables, and we're now starting to do what's called a response surface model type DoE, building these multi-dimensional process models that allow us to really dial in those settings. So within our course, how do we kind of bring this across? We have lots of these conversations with the students, but then, Volker mentioned that the final exercise to students is this heck reaction exercise. So this is an interactive activity which JUMP have built using the JUMP scripting language. Ian Cox is the guy at JUMP that built it. And so it's based on a fairly generic heck reaction. And the students are looking to maximize the yield whilst minimizing the starting material and byproduct. And I guess this is actually a core concept, is optimization in chemistry. We often think about it as being just maximize yield, but usually, in the real world, you have multiple response parameters you're trying to optimize. So this is where DoE can be really powerful for understanding if you increase, really target increasing one, what's the trade-off in your other responses? So in this particular example, we're looking at 5 continuous variables down here and 1 categorical variable. And then the exercise provides a guided workflow. It's a series of windows that will pop up and take you through the process of selecting which variable you want to test in this next experiment, or variables, plural, you want to test, which type of design you want to use, and it'll then take you into the DoE JUMP window where you can set out your, build your experiments. And then the key thing is we can give you results, give the students the results there and then on the spot. Underneath the hood, JUMP is running this polynomial model. I'll apologize for the redaction here. In case any of my students see this webinar, I don't want them knowing the answers to the problem. But essentially, you've got this model, which has got your primary variables and your various interactions. And then it will take that and calculate what the yield, starting material, and byproduct would be for the experiment settings that you got, that you chose. And through this, the students can test out different experiment designs. They can have a play with the various factor profilers. They can simulate production runs. So how would this experiment run if they ran it in the plant and did 50 batches of it? Is it going to always be good, or if the temperature changes, is it going to throw it off? So it's quite a cool tool for testing, comparing, and just giving the students that practice there and then on using it. And they can take this tool away and use it at home as well. So, wrapping up quickly, where can you go for further information? the JUMP learning page part of the website is key. So if you go onto the JUMP website down here, www.jump.com, Learn JUMP is a tab on the top. It's all there. The learning library has these one-page guides that are very good. You know, if you want to do a definitive screening design, there is a one A4 page that tells you everything you need to know to get started doing a definitive screening design. This statistical thinking course, really recommend it. It is very good. It takes about 2 to 3 hours, and you don't even have to have the JUMP software. There's a sort of virtual client, virtual version of the software you can use if you don't have access to JUMP, or you could download a trial version. But really, if you're interested in getting started learning about DoE, that's a good place to go for an initial introduction. The Statistics Knowledge Portal kind of allows you to bring up your vocabulary about statistics. There's all the online documentation. Read that as the manual for the software on the website. I find it very useful. Once you know a little bit about how to use the software, then this allows you to start digging into detail about what does this number here mean? What does that number mean? And then the blogs and the forums are also very good for more, you know, kind of expanding your knowledge and more niche topics. The final plug I will give on this page is for this Smarter Experimentation for Chemists online course being run by JUMP and Chemistry World next month. So it's 5 one-hour sessions over a week, and it will be very good. Phil Kay is a very good speaker. So if you're interested in learning about JUMP, either do the statistical thinking course or go and do this course here. Either one of those, but they'll be very good courses. If you're here to learn more about RAW, say go and check our website. Is the best thing. Check our website. Send us an email at raw@imperial.ac.uk. Follow us on Twitter or join our mailing list. The same goes for the React CDT. If you're trying to find information about the React CDT, you can always go to the RAW website and find the links from there. And then I will say as well, we usually run a lot of training events. Things are a bit more sluggish at the moment with COVID-19, but we're looking to start gearing that up again soon. So keep an eye on the website and join our mailing list and join our Twitter feed to get the up-to-date information about when we're running our next training events, which will be open to external parties. So all that remains is for me to thank all the people and organisations which have gotten us to where we are today. Within RAW, I cannot thank Dr. Paola Farini enough. She's my partner in crime in running these courses. So the other expert user we have. And then, of course, you've got JUMP. JUMP's been very supportive of everything we've done at Imperial College. You've got, of course, Volker, who's been here right from the start. And then Ian Cox, another associate, developed this heat reaction exercise for us. And Robert and Hadley have both participated and been content providers in our workshops. Finally, I'll thank all our various sponsors, instrument providers, and industrial partners in RAW, and of course the EPSRC for providing the funding, which gives me meals and all of that. And of course you for your time. So I think I'll hand back over to the moderator.
You will, and the next thing we'll do is actually run our final poll. So we're just looking to learn a little bit more about the people who have joined us today. So let's get that poll on screen. So how do you use design of experiments today? Do tick all of the boxes. We're really interested to know what proportion of our audience are currently using DoE and what they're using it for. So do please tick those boxes. Meanwhile, thank you ever so much for all of your questions. There's a lot of questions that have come in. I'm going to try and group a few of them together so we can get through as many as we possibly can. And so while people are still filling in the poll, we've still got plenty of time for you to vote in that. One of the questions that has recurred throughout this is essentially what sorts of chemistry can you use design of experiments for? So we've had examples of, is it useful for physical chemistry experiments, electrochemistry, materials, nanocrystal growth kinetics? Lots of people asking similar questions. So Ben and or Volker, what are the sort of restrictions in terms of what kind of experiments you can use in design of experiments?
I would say I'd be pretty confident that design of experiments could give you some benefit in almost any field of chemistry. Yeah, sorry, my experience is purely in the synthetic chemistry realm of things, but I think it really comes down to what sort of variable types you're looking at and response types. You've got to think about, are you looking at lots of categorical variables or continuous variables, and then thinking about your responses. I don't think Volker mentioned, but you can do some really cool stuff in JUMP now where you're not just looking at a simple number as your response. You've actually got a function or a curve, and you can try and optimize for certain shapes. So there's really a lot of functionality there. And I say, from a synthetic chemist perspective, it's not always the greatest tool when you're trying to optimize categorical variables. We're working on that, and I wouldn't say completely rule it out. You just got to understand that it's more difficult to kind of try and draw those complex relationships between multiple categorical variables. Do you want to say anything, Volker?
Yeah, also from looking back to many workshops I gave about DoE, and also receiving many questions from students. Can I do this? Can I do that? As far as I remember, the answer was never, no, sorry, you cannot do this in JUMP. You have to use other software. Sometimes, of course, the answer was there are better ways to do this. Also in JUMP, it's not a best practice, but I think you can do everything in JUMP. It's probably the most versatile tool set you can get for DoE. And we didn't show the custom designer, which is, I think, the easiest to use design tool. It works like an assistant guiding the user through the process, designing the experiment step by step, having many options to fit the design to the problem at hand. And this is very easy to use, but at the same time, the most powerful tool I know to design an experiment.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who asked a similar version of that question. I hope that covers everything. Let's close this poll down now. Most of you have had a chance to vote. And we'll share the results. Interestingly, quite a significant proportion of the people are not currently using design of experiments. They are obviously considering doing so, which is why they're here. And hopefully today has shown not only how versatile and powerful the tool it really is, but also how you can learn a bit more about it and how you can start getting involved. So that's really interesting, and thank you to everybody for completing that poll. Let's shut the poll down now. We've still got a few minutes to run some questions. So let's dive right in. We have had a question here saying, I already know how to do DoE. I'd like to learn more about data analysis and output simulation. What courses would you recommend to learn not just the design bit, but the interpretation of the results at the end?
So I would not think about a special course here. I think that's a common design, a common goal of all our courses and also workshops, that we never just talk about the design and how to create the design, but I think also students want to know, okay, now let's go, and that's the fun part. As soon as you carried out the experiment, as soon as you have all the measurements in your design table, JUMP created an analysis script, and you just need to click on that one and you get to the profiler, where you can see all the relationships and all what's going on according to your model, of course. And then it's time to discuss. What is it telling us? What should we do next? What else should we try? What are maybe the recommended changes to our process? Or maybe should we maybe consider another model? But this is included in any design teaching activity. So I know about the full workflow, from thinking about what is the problem, what do we want, what is the goal, to okay, what to do with the results and where to take them and what's next.
I would add to that, the statistical thinking course online that JUMP do is very good. it has a series of modules, and I started off just doing the design of experiments module, and then got hooked and went and did all the other modules. So that will give you a nice, all the way from basic thinking about how you should think about problem solving, but also doing all the analysis, machine learning, all this kind of stuff. It gives you a nice introductory flavor to how to do that.
We've already mentioned Phil Kay as well, who's running our course in June. Phil Kay has produced a series of blog posts that really does take you from the very beginnings all the way through to complex analysis. That's on Jump's website. But Phil's he's, as well as being a very good teacher, he's a very good writer. So do look those up if you're interested in how you can take your existing understanding of DoE that bit further. We've had a question from Shirley Min Yang, who says, I have no knowledge about modeling or programming. Would DoE be too challenging? Do you need that background understanding of the modeling and the programming and the coding, or does DoE take the heavy lifting for you?
I think this is where having a good software package really helps. You don't need to. I showed some of this scripting that you don't need to know that. The software handles all of that for you. The modeling is all handled under the hood. And you can dig as deep as you want, but if you just want to see what's on the surface, it will present the core summary statistics to you. So Jump is a very good package for this. You don't need to understand how to write your own software, your own programs. You don't need to have a lot of don't need to know how to do modeling. It does it all for you. It's point and click.
Excellent.
And I want to add, this is a lot of fun for the students because it's so easy to use. It motivates the student. It's also very visual and interactive. So students like to play and see what's going on. But this also makes the concepts, the theory you want to teach, very transparent. And students can also answer questions. Oh, what if we add interactions? What will happen? So all of this, what if, can be done very easily, and you can see what it means. And it's a very fast learning approach, and it's fun. So, yeah.
So, well, speaking of students as well, a few people have asked what sort of level are we looking at, master's level, PhD, postdoc? What level is it appropriate to get into? But I think we've had one that kind of encapsulates it. Someone said, I'm a second year undergrad chemist. I think it's essential to start thinking in this way, as chemistry is a practical science. So she said, thank you. But at what point would you recommend, if it's not in your course as an undergrad, for example, is it a good time, a good opportunity to do some of these online training courses so that when you go on to be a postgrad or go into industry, you're already armed with the sort of information and the familiarity with the software that you need?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's certainly a good opportunity, a good additional thing to put on your CV. Go and do the online courses, things like that. I do think DoE will come to the undergraduate courses over time. I guess one of the major barriers, limitations would have at the moment is you think about what's a traditional undergraduate chemistry lab experiment. It's more about teaching the practical aspects of handling the glassware and doing that. So there's less opportunities to run a whole series of experiments and build up a data set and test parameter. But I think we're updating and modifying our experiment courses over the years, and I think we're going to actually move much more, bring that research earlier into the course so that students learn about it earlier, and that's where I think DoE would fit in nicely. So at the moment, we're teaching it to master's students and above. I think over time we will see it in the undergraduate course. I wouldn't feel like you're missing out necessarily if you're not getting it right now, but it'd be a good thing to put on your CV.
Thank you. So we have about a minute left. We'll try and squeeze in one very quick question. This is from James Aspden, who says, how long do you think it would take to be able to implement a DoE approach if you are completely new to DoE? So we're starting from a standing start. How long should we be looking at planning this in?
An afternoon. Yeah, so I think, honestly, I think you want to be a bit careful about picking your first experiment to do, but if you just want to, 3 or 4 hours, you could go through that online course and have enough knowledge there that you could do a design for a simple experiment, and then it's up to you whether you go and, run that experiment and test it. Or there's also a lot of data sets within JUMP, so that's the nice thing about these courses, is it gives you data to practice on. So the elements of using the software and doing DoE, yeah, an afternoon, and you'll have enough knowledge. If you want to know kind of the ins and outs of how it applies to your core subject, might take a bit longer.
There's maybe one more recommendation. So I would suggest start small. Yeah, so maybe just run an experiment on something you already know about, where you have a clear idea what should be the output. And this is just to build some confidence in this approach. It's new, it's very powerful. It has many bells and whistles you can use, but start small and then add other options and use more sophisticated methods. And there are also examples in JUMP, simple examples which get you started. And I think also the statistically thinking course can help you with that, getting started.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We have run out of time, I think, but you can find a lot more resources at JUMP's website. And of course, I'm going to reiterate there are upcoming Chemistry World webinars that we have planned with JUMP, looking at smarter experimentation for chemists, looking at mastering complex processes with JUMP as well. So have a look at chemistryworld.com/webinars and sign up for those. We use the same platform you've seen today, so they'll be very familiar and we can get straight into it. But that is really all we have time for. A huge thank you to Benjamin Deadman, who's Facility Manager at RAW at Imperial College London, and to Volker Kraft from JUMP's academic programme. Thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who joined us and asked such wonderful questions. We will send those on to our speakers so they can get back to you if there's things that they think they can contribute. There is an exit survey that you're going to encounter on your way out of this webinar, and there's a key opportunity in there for you to say that you're happy to start, you want to get started, and can ask what is the next step for you guys. So do have a look at that, tick the box. Somebody from JUMP will be in touch to help you on your design of experiments journey. Thank you to JUMP as well. We work with them quite a lot for this sort of thing, but they always find us interesting topics, interesting people, and they deliver workshops like we've had today, amongst other things. So thank you to them. So that's it for this Chemistry World webinar. Keep an eye out in your inbox for the recording and your certificate of attendance. I'm Ben Valsler, Chemistry World's digital editor, and I'll see you for the next Chemistry World webinar.